Well, this next step is totally unnecessary, but I'm going to add that little bead detail right to the top of the outside rails because I've got it chucked up in the router, and why not? I've clamped the two rails together so the router base has more surface to ride on, and it shouldn't take more than a couple passes. I like that. I'll give these a quick sanding and they're ready for primer. I do need to add the little lip that goes on the bottom here to hold the slats. That'll be next after I sand them. This is another place where that credit card comes in handy to sand this little groove right here. It really makes a big difference. Getting down to the details, while I had the router out, I put a little A here on the rail and on the headboard. So if I don't put the rail connectors on exactly right, if you always add up A and A, you're going to be good. And you can't put the other one on backwards. So it's time to glue on this rail. I've got everything set and nothing left to do but do it. I've got it clamped in place. I'm going to put some screws in here. To hold it. Then I can take the clamps off and do the next one and not wait for this glue to dry. I'm going to use these deck screws. I know there's a lot of people saying those have no, those just don't work. They have shear strength and it'll break, but the glue is going to hold this rail on. The screws are just here as clamping devices, and I'm going to leave them in. I probably don't need to pre-drill, but I am. Big day. Finally going to attach the hardware here. This is from Woodcraft. It's got mixed reviews online. One of the problems is that there's no instructions on how to install these. And another guy complained that you have to drill a 1/2-inch hole here in the footboard and headboard, and they're supposed to be flush mounts. I don't see that as a big problem. The rail is just a little bit proud of here. These have a little bit of play in them, and that's good, but they also snitch up pretty tight. This is an 11/64 self-centering bit here. And I'm just going to start the hole. I'm using this one because it fits here the best. And it will center that. Once I have it centered, I'll switch to this tapered bit. Now, it calls for a number 8 screw. So this is my number 8 pilot hole. But this is a non-hardened screw. And you want to make sure you use non-hardened wood screws for this because a hardened screw could shear off. I'm also going to use a hardened screw to drill in. It says to use at least 5/8 of an inch. This is 1 1/4 inches. This should just come through this wood. For this wood is right at 1 inch, and then I've got the metal here. If it comes through on this first one, I'll just take it to the grinder and grind off the tip. That's not going to be a problem because the pilot hole will be there. That's the plan. Now that those are centered, I can take it off and switch bits. I have those pilot holes started. Having those pilot holes, I'll use the number 6 case hardened screw. Take it in ready for the real thing. Yeah, just for a little more insurance, I'm going to put a little beeswax on each one of these. If it's not case hardened, it's real easy to strip out. If you're ever putting in brass screws, and when you go to the hardware store, make sure you get a steel screw, or better yet, a case hardened screw, the same size, and put that in prior to the brass screw, because brass screws are really hard to drill or to put in wood without a nice pilot hole. So this thing doesn't spin around. I'm just going to anchor one more here. But I do want to make sure that's not going to pop through. Sure enough, it did. So I need a little bit of trim on that. Because this is not a case hardened screw, I'm able to clip the end off here with my lineman's pliers. Now, the reason I'm going to this trouble is because you can get 1 inch, but you can't get 1 inch and 1/8. And I want these to be as long as possible. And an inch, I thought 1 1/4 inches. I looked at it and I thought 1 1/4 inches would work, but it just popped through just enough to catch the clothes on. So it just popped through. I could just feel the very end. So this is not going to be a problem. It'll drill right in without that tip, and we'll be just fine, and I'll have as much screw in that wood as possible. So I'll just clip off the last 30 seconds of the thread here, and that's all I need. That'll do it. So I don't lose this, I'm just going to put it right back on. There wasn't really a need to take it off other than camera angle. All I have to do now is to repeat that on with all 4 fasteners. This is the jig. This shelf here is especially important because I was able to pretty much set this bed up and just rest these rails on here. So, and my goal is to mark exactly where that needs to go. And there it is, right there, that little indentation. So, I'm ready to screw the hole, drill the hole. That is plenty deep enough. Now I can follow the same procedure. I have this marked off here so that it's 77 inches from rail to rail. This little reveal right here on the back leg. I just need to pull that tight. I'm going to mark the center hole. It's going a little crooked because I can't reach it. But it is the center. So I've got all those marked. Now I can drill the pilot hole straight. Smoking. Then using the case hardened screw, I can make the hole perfect. and not risk twisting off one of my wood screws. Set this back up. Take the hardware off now because I know I can't screw it in there as it is. Use wax now on the wood screws. Put that in most of the way, and then start the other one. And now I should be able to slide that on. There we go. Nice and tight. So, according to my calculations, these slats should be about 11 5/8 inches apart. So I cut a couple of pieces off of the jigs I used to put on the rails. I'm not sure it's necessary to screw these down, but I know that's what you'll see on higher end pieces of furniture. And why not? So I've got the center support clamped in here. To make this easier on myself, I got these T-nuts. These will screw into that. So I'm going to build this thing upside down and then flip it over. So I'm simply going to put a support here, one in the middle, and one the other end. T-bolts are known for coming off. Well, I had a little 5-minute epoxy here. That should do it. When I found these in the barn, I thought, wow, those look close, but they fit perfectly. One of them had a missing foot, and I went to all three of the stores in town, Ace, the blue box, and the orange box, and none of them had anything like it, so I made one. I had a little plastic stuff, I'm not sure what it's called, some kind of HDTD, some plastic that you make runners out of for jigs, and I drilled a little hole in there and epoxied that in. It seems to be staying. So I'm going to use it. The only thing left to do now is to screw these in and flip this board over and screw it in. There it is, flipped over, finished. Kind of a weird feeling. This basement is not big enough to show you the headboard and the footboard at the same time. The only thing I have left to do now is to take these slats out and look over everything, make sure it's all right, and then for the big reveal on Saturday or Sunday.